Shavua Tov. Today's daf is daf Lamed Daled, but we'll start with Lamed Gimel, which is a very short daf. And then we'll move on in Mirz Hashem to Lamed Daled. Abaye Omar, the Mishnah is talking about a case where there were 6 people who saw somebody approach them, and each one was Makabel Naziris with a Tanai. And Kigon di Omar, when the first noder on this list of 6 people said Tokidei Dibur Hareini Nazir Shezeh Ploni. So it means that he made a Tanai that this so-and-so is Reuven, who's coming in our direction. He identifies him. Inami Lav Plonihu, and if he's not Reuven, then a heavy Nazir. Then in any event, I want to become a Nazir. So even if the Ba Kenegdo, even if that person who's coming towards him is not Reuven as he thought it was, I'll still become a Nazir. So what that means is that according to Abaye, he was Choser Bo. He retracted his original statement when he made the Tanai that this is Reuven. And now he accepted upon himself the Naziris even on the tzad, even if this person who's coming Kenegdo is not Reuven. Umay. And now we have to understand the words of Beis Hillel, who says that his Naziris is not a valid Naziris unless it was Lonis Kaimu Dvarov. It means Lonis Kaimu Dvarov Rishonim. And it means that his first statement, which was that so-and-so is Reuven, turned out to be incorrect, inaccurate, but Ela Dvar Vachronim. But since his second statement, in which he accepted upon his Naziris, even if that person who's coming connected is not Reuven, that's going to be valid, and that generates a Kabbalas Naziris without any condition. So therefore, he's a Nazir, even though Lonis Kaimu Dvar Harishonim in Abaye's reinterpretation of the words of Beis Hillel. Now the Mishnah talks about the following machlokas. What happens if that person who's coming Kenegdam flies the coop and he cannot be identified? That's called Hirtil Achorov, Eino Nazir. So the Gemara says the following: Taima mishum dertia lachorov. Now, the Gemara is now approaching this Mishnah from the perspective of Rabbi Yossi. Let me just sorry. Okay, I don't find it just right now, but it means that even though he enters into a suffix situation because he realizes that there's a possibility that he won't be able to identify that person who's coming Kenegdo, nevertheless, he accepts upon himself Nazir. So the Gemara's Medaik as follows: Taima mishum der tiachor of ha'asi lekaman havi Nazir. If he didn't fly the coop, but rather he comes towards us, then he is a Nazir. And that would mean that although he realized up front that he was entering into a suffix situation, nevertheless, he accepted upon himself Naziris. And the Gemara now is going to embark on analysis, Mani, who is the author of our Mishnah in this kind of an uncertain Kabbalas Naziris. And here we start with today's daf Lamed Daled. Ilema Rabbi Tarfon, if we're going to assume that the author of Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon, that it can't be, because Rabbi Tarfon never accepted an uncertain Kabbalas Naziris. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says that if Chazer Me'achorov, none of the Nodrim are are in a valid, have accepted upon themselves a valid act of Nazirus, is mihavi Nazir, according to Rabbi Tarfon, would the person be a Nazir? Even in a case where the person who was Kavi Kenegdom did not turn his back and fly the coop, but came into B'shaita the Konos at the moment that he took upon himself his Nazirus lo yada, he didn't know clearly or definitely Ploni hu lav Ploni hu, whether or not that person is indeed Ruvain as he identified him. Is Michal le Nazirus? But Tanya, we have Rabbi Yehuda, Bishum, Rabbi Tarfon, Ein Echad Mihem, Nazir, not one of the 6 people is a Nazir. If he shall lenit Nazirus alafla, the Torah says, Ish ki yafli, Ish o Isha ki yafli lindor nedel Hashem, Nazir, and that means hafla. Hafla means a definite, clear-cut acceptance of Nazirus. There's no iffy, wishy, washy thing, and maybe I'll be a Nazir, maybe I won't. If at the time of the Kabbalah's Nazirus it wasn't absolutely certain and clear that he was accepting Nazirus, that's not a flaw, and the Nazirus is not chal. And in our Mishnah, it wasn't clear to any of the 6 people who were looking at this figure coming towards that way, whether or not they know for sure, and whether or not therefore they would be a Nazir, or they've been making a mistake and they wouldn't be a Nazir. Therefore, our Mishnah of Hertia Lachorov, which implies that if he did not fly the coop, then the Nazirus would be chal, that could not reflect the Shita of Rabbi Tarfon. Ella, Rabbi Yehuda de Krihu. This is the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda of Kri, which we had on what daf? I'm just trying to figure that out. We had it in Nidarim on daf Yutes, and also here in Nazirus on daf Ches. The Sanya we learned in the Brisa, Hareni knows Amanashi Hebekrize Meakur. He took a neder of Nazirus on the condition that this pile would have a volume of Meakor and Holach Umatzo Shenignavo Sha'avad. Now he can't figure out whether or not indeed there was a Kima Tanai, whether or not there was Meakor, because the Kri has now been taken away. It's lost, stolen. Is Rabbi Shimon also Rabbi Yehuda Matir? Here's the machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. And I think before, at the beginning, I mentioned Rabbi Yossi. I'm sorry, I meant Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Shimon is the one who says that a person is machnes is atzmo l'sofek neder sofek nazirus. Rabbi Yehuda is matir because he says a person doesn't want to put himself into that situation of a sofek, whether or not his nazirus is valid or not. When he accepts nazirus, he's not interested in the sofek, because the sofek makes it almost impossible for him to get anything less than a full life's worth of nazirus, because he won't be able to bring his karbonis nazir to sofek klul nazara, and therefore without the kabbalah, without the havas karbonosov, he remains asur ben nazirus for the rest of his life. So his kavanah when he's makabel nazirus was only if it becomes absolutely clear that he is a nazir vadai. So our Mishnah, which says that if he was makabel nazirus on a t'nai, that if so-and-so is coming towards them is Reuven, if afterwards we find out who that is, and it turns out he made the right calculation, that so-and-so is in fact Reuven, then the nazirus will be chal. But if on the other hand the person flies the coop, then in such a case he's a sofek nazir, and he never had in mind, according to Rabbi Yehuda, to accept upon himself sofek nazirus. And Rav Shimon Savar came into Ilo Nignav, Dilma Havi Bemeakur, Havi Nazir. Since if the pile of the Kri was not taken away, and there's a possibility that it might have in fact a volume of Meakar, therefore the Noder accepted upon himself a Nazirus B'Tnai. And therefore, he would have to be in a situation of a sofek nazirus, and that's exactly what he had in mind. It's hashtanami, even though now that it's stolen, Havi does it. Again, it'll be a nazirus that's chal midim sofek, but Safek Nazirus Lahachmir, and a person would agree to accept upon himself a Safek Nazirus, and that was his Kabbalah. Hachinami, here too, if we apply the logic of Rav Shimon to our Mishnah, when he was Makabel Nazirus, if so-and-so who's coming towards them is in fact Reuven, and therefore there is an element of Safek here, since if we would know and we'd be able to be absolutely sure, determined that this person coming against him is Reuven, and he didn't fly the coop, so he'd be a Nazir Vadai. Now, too, that we can't find that figure and determine whether he's Reuven or Shimon because he went out to the wall blue yonder, then he's a Nazir Misaf. And this leads us to the Mishnah at the end of the parak. Again, 6 people are coming, walking. Ra es hakoi. In this case, they saw an animal called a koi, which is a Safek chaya, Safek behema. And the Gemara in Chulin Adaf Pei records a machlokes between Tanoim as to what exactly a koi is. One opinion is it's an ayil habar, a kind of a wild ram, and yeshomim habam and ataish min atzvir. It's the product of a breeding of a taish and a tzvir. A taish and a tzvir come from 2 different species. And we don't know what the status of the child, the offspring of that mixture is. Rabbi Yossi says it's a birya b'fei He has a 3rd opinion. And there was never achra amongst the Chachamim whether or not a koi is in fact a min chaya or a min behema. Although there is the shita of Shimon Gamliel who says that koi is a min behema. Our Mishnah here in Masechet Nazir reflects the shita of Rabbi Yossi that koi is a Safek chaya, Safek behema. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi, in Masechet Chulin, we have to be machmir in both directions, kechaya, that there's a chiyuv kisi adam after the shchita, and kebehema, that there's an iser kares in the achila of the chelik. Beyond that, it would be prohibited to breed a koi with either a chaya or a behema, because you might be violating the iser of kalai behema. So now, the first guy on the list of 6 says the following. Hareini Nazir shezeh chaya. I'm accepting upon myself Nazirus on the condition that this is a chaya. The other one said, Hareini Nazir shezeh eino chaya. He thought that this koi is a min behema, which in fact is one of the shitos, as we mentioned before. A 3rd one comes along and he says that I want to accept Nazirus if one of the 2 are correct. And the 4th one more or less says the same thing, just with a different form. Hareini Nazir shezeh behema. Now we get up to the Shlishi who says, I'll accept Nazirus if in truth this is a behema. The V says, like the Rishon, just he switches around and knows she'ein zeh behema. The 5th guy says, Hareini Nazir shezeh chaya v'behema. And the 6th guy says, Hareini Nazir she'ein zeh lo chaya v'lo behema. And the Gemara says the following. The Mishnah says the following. Kulam Nazirim, I, meaning number 6 on the list, accept on myself Nazirus if it's true that they're all Nazirim, which is logically impossible. Harei kulam Nazirim. Misafek, they're all Nazirim. Now, the impression you get here is that they're all Nazirim bevadai. But that would only make sense if this Mishnah that we're learning now is authored by Beit Shammai, who hold on Daf Lamed Beis, that when 6 people are going, they're all Nazirim, against Beis Hill, who says that only Niskaimu Dvarav is a Nazir. Now, our Mishnah is talking about Nazirim Misafek. So then, our Mishnah reflects the sheet of Shimon in Hirtia Lachor of Kulam Nazirim Misafek, that a person is Machnas Zatzmal is Safek. And here too, the Koi is a Safek Chaya, Safek Behema. And we'll never know for sure who's right here. And therefore, they're all Nazirim Misafek. Now, in the Masechet, he adds one comment. He says, "V'chol zeu legabe ashisha sheroas hakoi." Now we have another 3, and we're going to jack up the number to 9. The Brisa quoted here by the Gemara says, "Tani chad," according to one Brisa, Tishin is zero. There were 9 people who made this Tanai to be Makabel Nazirus on something that's a suffix like a koi. That's one Brisa. But Tanya Yidich, another Brisa is Teisha Nazirios. There's only one person, and 9 different Nazirios of 30 days in succession will be Chal Misafek. So Gemara says, Bishlei Matisha Nazirim. I understand how you could work out the Mishnah in a scenario of 9 Nazirim. Kigon Davi Gavri Tfei de Itfas vi Azul Bey. So there were not only 6 people, but there were 9 people. Each one was Masnes Naziris on a double Misupach, and they're all Nazir Misafek. Ella, but Teisha Nazirios, Lachad Gavra, Heichi Mishkachesla. Why under the sun would we imagine that there are 9 different Nazirios for one person? Gemara says, Bishlei Mishis Mishkachesla. I could explain without any problem how you would have 6 Nazirios, Kidisnan, Aval Tlas, Heichi Mishkachesla. So in our Mishnah, we said that we have 6 people, but instead of 6 people, we could say it's one person, and he saw the koi, and he said, I'm going to be a Nazir because a chaya. I'm going to be a Nazir because it's not a chaya. I'm going to be a Nazir because it's a behema. I'm going to be a Nazir because it's not a behema. I'm going to be a Nazir because it's both a chaya and a behema. I'm going to be a Nazir because it's neither a chaya nor a behema. So in each case, he has a suffix, and therefore each one of his statements, of his Hareini Nazir, is a Kabbalah suffix of 30 days of Nazir. So we multiply by 6. Aval Tlas, but now you're adding another 3. Hechi Mishkachesla. Omer Rav Sheshes, Kigon Diyom Hareini Nazir, Unazir Sakol Alai. After he saw that 9 people were matvis and were masnan and Naziris on this kai, he said, another guy, let's call him guy number 10, Hareini Nazir Naziris Hakol Alai. I'm accepting all the Nazirios of the 9 people who came before me. Hadran Alecha Beis Shammai. And now we begin the parak of Shloshim Minim, which is the 6th parak of Masechet Nazir. And this parak is divided up into 4 different parts. One part is what's also to a Nazir. Second part is the dinim of a Nazir who contracted tumah in the middle of his Nazirs. The third part is the din of a Nazir who completed his Nazir V'tara. And finally, the psul karbonos of Naziris. And if the karbonos turned out to be possible, what's the status of the Nazir? Shlosha mini asurim bin Nazir. There are 3 kinds of isurim in a Nazir. What are they? 3 categories of isur. Number 1, hatuma. He's not allowed to be mitamil mesim. Number 2, atiglachas. He's not allowed to cut his hair. And number 3, hayotzim in a gefen. He's not allowed to eat or drink grapes or anything that comes out of the grapes. The Mishnah explains, what does it mean, hayotzim in a gefen? Kol hayotzim in a gefen, mitztarfim ze im ze. In other words, whether you have dry grapes, what we call raisins, right? Or lachim meaning natural grapes in their original state. Mitztarfim zeh im zeh. Now, what we should add here, as we're going to get into this, is chartzanim and zogim, which are the pits and the covers, but we're not sure which is which. One of the two, either chartzanim or zogim, are the pits, and the other are the coverings, as we'll soon see. But all the above, number one, anovim lachim, natural grapes. Number two, anov yeveshim, dried grapes. Number three, chartzanim, and number four, zogim. They're all mitztarfim zeh zeh. In other words, let's say he eats a quarter of a kazayis of anovim lachim, a quarter of a kazayis of anovim yeveshim, a quarter of a zayis of chartzanim, a quarter of a zayis of zogim. We're going to integrate all 4/4 and make it one kizayis, and it's going to be chayiv malchus. Now the Mishnah tells us, what is the shear with regard to liquids that come from the geffen, and also what parts of the geffen are also. He's not chayiv malchus. Okay, as far as the grapes themselves, or for that matter, the chartzanim and the zogim, you need a shear of kizayis. As far as shtia is concerned, we have a Mishnah Rishona and a Mishnah Achrona. If we go to Mishnah Rishona kizayis, that even shesia of the liquids that are extracted from the grapes are also, for the purpose of generating malchus, a shear of kizayis, which is very strange. And it's an anomaly because the shear of kizayis is for ochlin, and now we're talking about mashkin, we're talking about shesia. In any event, the way you would measure this, as Tosfos points out here, is that you fill up a cup to the top, and what you do is you bring, let's say, a zayis, meaning the size of a zayis, and you put it into the cup, and you measure how much of a volume of liquid flowed over, was pushed out over the brim. So, well, this is the Mishnah Achrona. I may have made a mistake. I said the Mishnah Rishona. The sequence here is the other way around. And now we're going to turn to Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis.